Okay.
All right, let me take the crisis in Syria to tonight's Combat Ready Party panel. It's Reason Magazine's editor-in-chief, Catherine Maggie-Ward, joined by Observer columnist Michael Malice, also the author of the North Korean treatise, Dear Reader. We'll call it that. And U.S. News editor at the Wall Street Journal, Glenn Hall, is also here. Welcome, everyone. Hey. You just made a funny noise. Okay, Glenn, I will start with you because foreign policy obviously now is dominating the news cycle and this presidency. Do you think there's something to what Dr. Paul was saying about maybe not having all the facts in, but certainly being a more convenient narrative for this administration?
Well, I think one of the things that got Donald Trump elected was his tough talk against ISIS. And I think people do live in a certain amount of fear in the United States about what kind of domestic terrorism may be brought over. They'd like to see something be done about that. And so I think this all ties into that. Now, whether it's about regime change, I don't think that's the priority. The administration has taken a few pains today to say our first priority is defeating ISIS. And I think that is a priority that the American people, by and large, would support. I'm not sure everybody's on board about regime change as a motive for our activities.
Yeah, I don't know that the president is necessarily on board with that, but he certainly has a number of people around him who are strongly making that case. And, you know, I don't know how more people don't see this as being disastrous and having bad outcomes.
There's two points I'd make very quickly. They couldn't repeal and replace Obamacare correctly, and now they're going to repeal and replace someone in a country that most Americans can't find the map, where there isn't a second party, let alone a third party. The second party is the Islamic State. This is madness. And every single cretin in the corporate press who is cheering this attack can't wait to turn their backs on President Trump and make fun of him and humiliate him when it becomes a quagmire and disaster. This is one of the stupidest things he could have done, and it takes a lot for me to get actually livid because I'm an anarchist and I hate politics in general.
Yeah.
But war is the worst thing that any government can do. And the idea that we're going to have more military coffins because of a civil war that's been going on over there where there are no good guys is absolutely demented.
Well, and also, you know, you make the point about the corporate press. And what have they said about this president and collusion with Moscow? And now they're deriding the administration for possibly getting into a hot war with Russia. Can they have it both ways?
Well, of course, all they care about is blood and suffering, and they're desperate for another FDR, Woodrow Wilson. How many bodies were lost? Meanwhile, when Thatcher and Reagan end the Cold War without a shot being fired, they're dismissed and swept into the dustbin of history by these people. It's disgusting.
All right, are you surprised by the shift toward militarism from a president who talked a lot about the mistakes we've made in the Middle East and being essentially, aside from ISIS, non-interventionist?
So this is, I mean, Donald Trump of almost exactly a year ago described the administration's current policy as idiocy and madness. Those were his own words a year ago, that the idea that we should be simultaneously fighting ISIS and trying to effect regime change in Syria is, he was right the first time. It's essentially idiocy and madness. And, you know, it takes a lot for me to find myself saying Donald Trump is right and then finishing that sentence in any way. But old Donald Trump is right. New Donald Trump is wrong. And I think, you know, Michael is right that this weird moment where everyone says, like, hey, welcome to the club, you're a real president now, congratulations on the bombings. It's like a Hallmark card sentiment.
The big question now is what happens next, right? So if it's just these missile strikes, that hasn't gone as far as you guys are suggesting it might, and how, you know, that could be a different dynamic than we sent a signal and now we move on. Now,
there are 4 long years ahead, though, right? Even if it's just these missile strikes right now, it's a repeat play. This is something that he can't.
Yeah, I think it's like a late-stage alcoholic having a sip of vodka and then being expected to drive a bus full of kids home later in the night. It's not going to happen. A number of military analysts are claiming the missile attack on Syria was also intended to be a warning to North Korea. It comes amid word that a U.S. Navy strike group, complete with an aircraft carrier, is heading toward the Korean peninsula. Now, last week, NBC News reported that the Trump administration now has several options for dealing with the communist regime there, among them sending some nuclear weapons to South Korea as a deterrent and plans to assassinate Kim Jong-un. So will this get worse before it gets better? Michael, you've obviously spent time in North Korea. How does this play out?
I mean, apoplexy is an understatement because the administration has been far more bellicose towards North Korea than they've been towards Syria. And the fact that we've bombed Syria, as I've told you before on the show, there are 100 to 200,000 people in concentration camps in North Korea right now who are told explicitly and constantly constantly, if the Americans invade, we're going to kill you all. They have nukes. They've had nukes since the 90s. They could have hit Seoul since the 60s. There's no question, in my mind at least, that the regime would enact nuclear retribution.
Yeah.
Kim Jong-il, when he was alive, after Romania fell, he showed footage of the Romanian leader Ceausescu being killed to all the leaders of the party and said, if the masses rebel, you personally are going to be killed. This is your fate. So they know if they're going down personally, and they will be killed with their families, and they will absolutely go down fighting. They've been waiting for this for decades.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, people talk about economic sanctions on North Korea, but this is not a rational
And let me make one more point.
Yeah.
All the North Korean news media right now are showing the footage of us swarming in and coming to finish the job we started in the 50s from their perspective, and it's factual footage that they're showing them.
Glenn?
You know, this is a two-pronged dynamic that we're dealing with, where, you know, in both cases we're starting a kind of proxy initiative against another major superpower. So in Syria, it's target up against Russia. How far are you willing to go in that conflict? Here with North Korea, they're nominally backed by the Chinese. Another difficult arrangement for us to engage in. But I think you're absolutely right. This is a very, very treacherous move here in terms of like what might provocation of North Korea result in. Very different than what is still a more contained conflict in the Middle East.
Yeah, and there is still a diplomatic relationship with Russia, you know, a nuclear power. There is not one with North Korea. Last word, Catherine.
I love the idea that this is all potentially going to hinge around which anniversary North Korea chooses to celebrate. A bunch of the coverage has said like, oh, well, you know, it's been 105 years since this and 87 years since that, and maybe they'll use that as the occasion to like make a bold move in honor of their previous. And it's, you know, just the extent to which it is such a sort of a cult of personality, that it is so dependent on a single decision maker, and that we don't know exactly what the provocation will be, but something like this could surely be it to tip them over.
Yeah, and the fact that it's tied to an anniversary, it shows that they are oddly sentimental, but it's almost guaranteed to end badly. I mean, it's heartbreaking because you know, the president has talked about being moved by those images of Syrian kids being killed by sarin gas, those babies. But you know, how many babies die in those North Korean concentration
Kim Jong-il during his lifetime said the way to deal with America is to go up to her and slap her across the face. And when he was, the mythology there is he got picked to be supreme commander by his dad because he said, if they attack North Korea, we will destroy the world. And his father, Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, said, spoken like a true supreme commander. So they revel in the idea of disproportionate retaliation.
Yeah, and taking the world down with them. Absolutely. All right, the party panel returns a little later because we're having so much fun. But first up, Congress is in recess for the next couple weeks. Republicans are back in their home districts where they're getting a tongue slapping from constituents on health care. So will they be any closer to repealing Obamacare when they return? I will ask Chris Steigerwald. He has answers. He is next. I'll make you a believer. Was Donald Trump's attack on a Syrian airbase also an attack on Native Americans? An editor at the famously liberal Mother Jones magazine says Tomahawk missiles represent a cultural case, a classic case rather, of cultural appropriation, and tweeted, quote, that the missiles are called Tomahawks must enrage a lot of Native Americans. The internet quickly exploded, and many commenters said her attempt to spark outrage is just plain ridiculous. Party panel is back. Catherine Maggie Ward, Michael Malice, and Glenn Hall. So, Catherine, I will start with you because I was just waiting for someone to make this case as I was watching the reports come in on Thursday night. Is this the ultimate cultural appropriation?
I'm reliably assured that wearing a feathered headdress at Coachella is the ultimate cultural appropriation, so I don't know how this could
really
also be that. Claire Jeffrey runs a hell of a magazine. She is a super, super talented editor. So, you know, I hesitate to denounce her fully as a human being for one dumb tweet, but this is a dumb tweet. This was not her finest hour.
Come on, man. I mean, of all the things you could rail against, either in defense of Native Americans or against the use of war materials.
My big complaint, though, is the Pentagon, when they name things, they always do it as if they are 6-year-old boys in their fort. Like, what are we going to call the mission where we go spit on girls? And it's like, let's call it tomahawks.
Do you know
every time.
You know why they're in their fort? Because the Native Americans were attacking them when they tried to colonize
It's
America.
true. The proud American fort-building tradition does stem
and
from...
we know the rock where, what's her name, the founder of Rhode Island was hiding behind when she was scalped. It's on the Bronx.
Hillary Clinton.
No, I agree that we shouldn't name American missiles over people who don't believe in private property. It's un-American.
Look, we are talking about war in the Middle East. We're talking about sarin gas on children. We're talking about all of these big problems out there. This is completely out of context. I think there's a time and a place for that discussion. This felt like the wrong time and the wrong place.
I'll say I think it's in context because her Rousseauist idea of the so-called his myth of the noble savage speaks to the basis of modern-day liberalism.
Yeah, but Rousseau is a horrible person.
Agree, and so is she.
All right, move over, Rolex, because sleep is the new status symbol. An article in the New York Times Magazine says getting enough sleep has not only become the ultimate sign of success, but it's also the key to being successful. Many companies apparently agree entrepreneurs have poured $32 billion into the development of sleep aids and devices since 2012, and some companies have even gone so far as to hire a sleep coach for their employees. Even the U.S. Army has declared that sleep is a pillar of peak soldier performance. So is getting 8 hours a night the newest way to tell the world that you've made it. Oh, so sleepy, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm already.
Do you you have 2 young children and
do.
a full-time job, so you obviously get 8 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, if sleep is status, I have no status. It's over.
You're a pauper.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it used to be right that waking up early was the status activities.
Yep.
Like I wake up at 2:30 in order to spend 20 minutes meditating before I dream journal and then make my spinach shake or whatever. So I mean, I am happy if more sleeping becomes a status symbol, but I lack
I'm
that
pro
status.
sleep.
I get 9 hours every day, go to bed at 2, wake up at 11.
Yes, that's how you do it. Exactly
But
right.
I think the most successful people are known for having very little sleep, like Clinton and Trump and Thatcher. They always had 4 hours. What I think this is a secret attempt by cat lovers to give cats a measure of status, because cats suck. But if their sleep is associated with status, then backdoor you have cats associated with status.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
And they're nocturnal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
totally
we
good
need diurnal animals.
Correct.
Who are big sleepers. Those are the ones that
Correct.
should be running the world. Glenn Hall, you're against sleep.
I don't get enough, so it's not by purpose that I'm against sleep. Now I think this is a really interesting shift in the dynamic, because exactly as you were saying, it was the status symbol to not get sleep. Now the status symbol to get sleep. What I think ultimately is at play here is big dollars.
Yeah.
Right? The ability to medicines for sleep. All of these apps for sleep.
A
the special
sleep
sleep
disruption
room.
tool called Thim that costs between $149 and $199. There's a headband you can wear for $400 called Dream, and it uses sound waves to induce sleep.
Interesting.
I do the same thing, but with
And Thim is my preferred pronoun. So
Is
that's,
it really?
yeah.
There's gear for sleeping and for not sleeping, though, right?
Yeah.
So really the key is, if you want to maximize the profit potential here, is we have to be pro not sleeping for a while, swing it to the pro sleep, swing it on
Or
back.
you could
You
do
buy the stuff
puppy
to put you to
uppers and
sleep.
doggy downers.
Yeah, exactly.
Ambien
Buy it and then buy it at the other end.
espresso. All right, thank you so much. Glenn, Michael, and Catherine. Woo! They woke me right up. Coming up, the